All right, let's talk about scales. If we're dealing with units of measurement, then there has to be this notion of a scale. And there are two types of scales. There's a measurement scale, which is the one that you're probably most familiar with, and that's something that has ordered marks, such as rulers and thermometers, and there's some sort of reference standard, i.e. all rulers and thermometers are kind of built off of a master plan so that they all do the same thing and they measure things the same way. And these types of measurement scales can either be ratio scales like rulers or interval scales like thermometers. Because remember, thermometers deal with temperature, and temperature are interval units. They don't have a true zero. And something twice as big doesn't make sense, right? 10 degrees is not twice as hot as 5 degrees. But ratios do, right? 10 pounds is twice as heavy as 5 pounds. A model scale is a ratio used to determine the size between a model and something it represents. And it can be a model airplane, a model car, a model house, a model city, a map, right? A map is a model of a big country's world, city, whatever it happens to be. And those are all proportional quantities. And there's some sort of constant of proportionality. So when they say it's a 1 to 10 scale, then that means this model is basically 1/10 the size of the big thing. And that's whenever it says it's a 1/10 scale and it doesn't list anything. So if there aren't any units of measure listed, then it's always assumed that the two numbers are measured with the same unit of measure, i.e. a 1/10 model scale means whatever this thing is modeling is exactly 10 times as big. So if you measured it in inches and then multiply that by 10, it would be that resulting measurement in inches. Now, something that isn't the same unit of measure, it'll list them, right? When it says a model is 1/10 scale, then you know that the units of measure are the same. But when you look at a map, it's not just going to say it's a 1 to 10 scale, it's going to tell you it's a 1 inch to 10 miles scale. So it's still kind of a 1 to 10 scale, but it really isn't because 1 inch on the map doesn't equal 10 inches, it equals 10 miles. So that's the big difference. If they don't list the units, then you assume that they're the same, i.e. if there was a model airplane that said it was a 1/72nd scale, then if you measured something on the airplane that was 1 inch long, you would assume that in the real world, that thing, whatever it was, would be 72 inches long or 6 feet. But if it told you it was 1 inch to 72 feet was the scale, then it's a totally different thing, right? They'll always list the units if it's not the same. Okay, the model scale I talked about where they have two different units of measure. If you want to figure out how big something is, you still can use the conversion line. So on a map, the scale tells you 1 inch equals 10 miles. And you want to figure out how far apart two towns are on the map if they are actually 64 miles apart. Simple. You start with the 64 miles. Then on your conversion line, you would have 1 inch over 10 miles because according to this map, that's now an equal fraction, right? That fraction still equals 1. 1 inch equals 10 miles, even though it doesn't in the real world, it does on your map. The miles would cancel, and you'd get 64 over 10, or 6.4 inches, and those two cities would be 6.4 inches away from each other on the map. Now, you would usually go in the other direction. You'd figure out, okay, if these two cities are 7.5 inches away from each other on the map, how far are they in miles? Well, it's the same idea. So you would set up your conversion line. You'd start with what you have. Okay, these two cities are 7.5 inches apart. I want to know how many miles that is. So I use my conversion of 1 inch equals 10 miles, and I just do 10 miles over 1 inch, right? Because if this fraction equals 1, it equals 1 in both directions. So I can list it in either directions. And obviously I want to do it this way because I want to be able to cancel the inches. So if I have inches up here, I need inches on the bottom. And now when I do the math, right, 7.5 times 10, I get an answer of 75 miles, and I know those two cities are 75 miles apart. So that's the beauty of the conversion line. It works even when you're converting things with different units of measure. So you could even go from miles per hour to kilometers per second.